Apologies about the delay in today's video. You see, I've been recently playing Blade and Soul Neo. It's been out for a couple of days, and I actually really enjoyed the original release of Blade and Soul, but probably not for the reasons that most people enjoyed it. See, I fell in love with the game's main story quest, and even though the voice lines were kind of not great, and the dialogue itself is really cheesy, the overall story about getting revenge for your fallen clan and becoming a martial arts master, only to become the teacher that was taken from you, and redemption and revenge and all that other stuff. I thought that it was great. I didn't know that they were actually going to do like a remaster of Blade and Soul Neo. If I did, then I forgot about it a long time ago. I was going to go into detail about what the game was about and all of its different mechanics and stuff like that, but I was playing through and there's a big problem. There's a bunch of problems, actually. I'm not entirely sure what they wanted or what they expected from a reset version of an MMO as old as this. And I will admit that the visuals are a little bit better, but that's about all they did. The character models still have incredibly egregious clipping. They didn't even bother refreshing or retouching any of the cutscenes that play, so there's a huge divide between the in-game assets and pre-rendered cutscenes because those are just ripped from the original game and reused again. So you'll be playing in a somewhat decent looking MMO, and then all of a sudden a cutscene will start and it looks really, really bad. It looks absolutely hideous. And that got me thinking, why did they bother with this? What's the point? Some of the other additional changes that they've made aside from just big visuals is giving players infinite stamina for not only sprinting but also gliding, and that does make movement and getting around the maps a lot more enjoyable, less cumbersome, and more fun to do. It just seems relatively minor. Now, I'm being told that they plan to make this a not pay-to-win version of the game, and I didn't really get too much into PvP, so I don't know too much about how bad that situation was. What I do know, however, is that there's another change, and that is with the player-earned cosmetics, which the original game had a lot of, and I would assume this game has them as well. But in the original game, I am more than certain that it was easier to earn the currency to use to get those in-game cosmetics. For example, there's this graveyard area where you used to defeat the enemies and they would drop these tokens that you would take to a gacha wheel and you'd spin. Now, obviously you hear gacha in these days and you think, oh no, it's trash. But this was actually okay because you couldn't purchase these with any sort of real money. You could only get them by defeating enemies. You couldn't even trade them with other players. But it was still a grind because the cosmetic, the outfit that the wheel would give you had a very low percentage of dropping. So there would be a lot of people in that area grinding on the mobs to get the tokens to use at the wheel. Well, in Blade and Soul Neo, they had the genius idea of making it to where the tokens would only drop from a world boss that spawned once every like 15 or so minutes, but the drop chance is still incredibly low. Now, there is a shop that you can spend in-game currency to get those tokens, but it's very, very expensive for new players, for new characters. You just don't have that much money when you're at this point in the game. So instead of having a bunch of people fighting the different mobs throughout the map, you instead have a situation where everybody's waiting at the spawn of this boss in order to defeat it to get a single token to use at the wheel. And it was at this point in time where I was like, man, all they had to do was just give people infinite sprinting in the original game. let them keep their characters and the cosmetics they already had, and probably would have gotten the same result, if I'm being completely honest with you. Because yes, if you played the original Blade and Soul, even if you transfer your account over, that I know of, you have to start over. With new characters, your cash shop items are gone, your levels, your skills, all of that stuff is gone. As an outsider, somebody who didn't follow Blade and Soul from beginning to end, this looks to me like an excuse for them to sell people the same cash shop items again. And that's really scummy. That's really scummy to do. As far as technical things, the audio mixing in the game is worse than the original, meaning that if you are like me and you just want to relive the story a little bit, the character voices are mixed way lower than the background music and the sound effects from like combat and stuff, and adjusting it in the options is only going to get you so far. Like, yeah, you can make it a little bit better, but only by a little bit. So the story isn't more fun to go through, grinding for stuff isn't more fun to do, and you reset everybody's account and cash shop items, so I'm just really confused as to what NCSoft was expecting people to feel when going into this new version of an old game. And when you compare it to things like Final Fantasy XIV, what's another popular MMO right now? I mean, obviously World of Warcraft, Path of Exile 2, and stuff like that. This is still an incredibly lackluster game. Don't get me wrong, when it comes down to gameplay, the combat is still every bit as satisfying as I remember it being. All of the different classes have different mechanics, but there's still counters. The skills branch off of one another and allow for a bunch of different combos, keeping combat fresh and engaging. It also does a very unique, it does a good job by being unique in a way that when you unlock different skills, you actually want to go out and practice how they chain into one another, how the combos work, how much damage they do, and what states they put your enemies in, knocking them down, lifting them up in the air, putting them in a state where they can be grappled, so on and so forth, freezing them, burning them, all of that stuff. And when you go out and you practice to see what combos fit your playstyle and whatnot, it really lends to the martial arts aesthetic that the entire game has permeating throughout its narrative and its world. So while you're training and leveling up and grinding, it really feels like you're working hard to become a martial arts master. And that's something that I don't think like any other MMO has done, where it doesn't, the progression is usually statistical, but in Blade and Soul it actually does feel like as your skill improves, that's the martial arts side of it, and I think that's awesome. But I think that they already had done that, and that Blade and Soul Neo hasn't really improved that sense of skill improvement. So I spent a lot of time recording footage for Blade and Soul Neo and decided that a lot of what I have was just a giant big nothing burger, and I really didn't want to waste your time with that sort of thing. So it's a much shorter, just me ranting about my thoughts about the state of this remastered or whatever it is. It is free, so you can go check it out for yourself if you feel like it. If you've ever played Blade and Soul, let me know what you thought about it down in the comments below. What do you think about the way it looks now? And is it something that you would pick back up? Or do you think that it has the staying power? As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in another video.